Hi, I'm Dr. Keith Graham from the School of Teacher Education at National Taiwan University. Welcome to my office hours. It is my pleasure to welcome my good friend, Dr. Xinyi Chang, Assistant Professor in the Department of Foreign Languages and Literatures at National Taiwan University. Dr. Chang recently published a very interesting article in the Journal of Multilingual and Multicultural Development. In that article, she analyzes how languages are positioned in both the Bilingual 2030 policy and the National Languages Development Act. Today, I wanted to extend beyond the policy and ask Dr. Chang about the roles of these various languages in Taiwanese bilingual schools. Dr. Chang, welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here.
I'd like to begin by talking about a line in the abstract of the paper, where you write, "The government argues that bilingualism and multilingualism can be developed in parallel." My impression from my reading is that you have your doubts about this aspect. I feel less doubtful about it because one of the things I tell my students at the beginning of the semester is that I will use the term bilingual to describe people and education, but I don't want them to strictly interpret the bi in the word as just two. And I encourage them to think about it as really two or more languages in their future practice. So with that in mind, I'd like you to educate me a little bit about this. How is what I'm doing the same or different from what the government is doing? And what are your thoughts on this idea of developing these languages in parallel?
I'm glad you raised that question. So you do have a very good point over there. When we teach our students about the idea of bilingualism, we want them to think about bilingualism not just strictly as two languages, right? If the bilingual policy is explicitly interpreted as embracing a multilingual view, then that is great. But the current way how the idea of bilingualism is presented in the policy documents doesn't seem to be that way. If we do a quick keyword search of the kind of different languages, the number of the times that these different languages appear in the policy documents, we can see that English kind of far exceeds the times that it appears in the policy documents, far exceeds the times that any other languages appear in the policy documents. So it's not that we cannot approach it from a more multilingual lens. It's just that currently the way that Taiwan understands bilingualism in the Bilingual 2030 policy is not interpreted that way. So a main argument that me and Professor He want to present in this paper is that any state level language policies should be discussed as an integrated whole, so that we can try our best to develop the multiple languages within Taiwan and advance multilingualism in Taiwan.
Another thing you wrote in the paper that caught my attention was this. You wrote, "The key message throughout the Bilingual 2030 policy is that knowing only Mandarin is insufficient." Now, I'm of the opinion that being monolingual just in general is insufficient in today's world, which I think aligns with this key message of the government in these documents. So what am I missing, or what am I not considering here?
Right. I do agree with you that right now, just knowing one language is not enough, right? So I think in that line, what we wanted to emphasize is that whether we should decide for all of Taiwan, all of Taiwanese, whether that additional language should be English. So we're still promoting multilingualism, bilingualism / multilingualism. And we still we want Taiwanese to learn additional languages, right? But whether we have to decide for them what language that is, I think we can give people a little bit more space, give schools, teachers, educators, communities a little bit more space in making that decision.
Toward the end of the paper, you ask this question. Aside from the English-Mandarin duo, what other types of bilingualism can be envisioned and encouraged? I really liked that line, so I'd actually like to have you answer your own question, but more specifically with regard to the Taiwanese education system.
So I don't have any absolute answer to this because Taiwan is a very multilingual society, right? Every pockets in different parts of Taiwan, they're different, I would say, focus on different combinations of languages. So we can leave this to the communities. Of course, what is that unit of analysis, right? What do we mean by communities? Is it like every city or every school, every region, district, area to decide? We're still promoting multilingualism, but if we still want to kind of keep what the bilingual 2030 policy wants to promote, and still we know there's so many languages, right? And if we want communities to really focus on two of all the languages, then we let them choose what the two languages they want to focus on, instead of us deciding or the government deciding that it should be Mandarin plus English.
That makes sense, but my question would be, why just limit it to two? I hope this doesn't come off as overly idealistic, but why can't all three groups of languages be instructional languages within a lesson or curriculum of a course? Why can't we set an expectation or vision for education that when you watch a class in Taiwan, you'll see students engaging and learning through all three languages at different times? So for example, maybe they do one stage of the lesson in language A and then transition to another language, language B, in the next activity. What do you think about that?
I would say we can approach the curriculum from a broader sense, like how we approach the word bilingualism that you were talking about earlier, right? Of course, when we ask frontline teachers to squeeze in 2 or 3 or even more languages within the same classroom space, they won't be happy, right? That's a lot for the teacher to handle and could be a lot for the students to handle too, especially if we don't give them enough time to have sufficient professional training and to really experiment with it. So I think the way we approach curriculum could include, let's think about the curriculum in a wider sense, right? Not just within the classroom space. So back to the national curriculum guideline, how do we put in all these different languages in the curriculum? Are we asking Mandarin teachers to incorporate Mandarin, the local languages, English, and possibly a second foreign language all in one classroom space? No, it's not promoted that way. They're kind of allocated in different spaces and different time slots. So if you think about and also expand the idea of curriculum in a temporal sense, for example, in the earlier years, we probably will spend more time on Mandarin and the so-called local languages, which are considered the students' mother tongues. And as we move along the curriculum, when the students get older, then we can bring in the international languages and then bring in the second foreign languages, right? So we kind of distribute or allocate the teaching of different languages at different time periods. We're not all squeezing it within the same kind of class period, right? So there are many ways to approach this. And this aligns with a lot of the second language acquisition theories that we teach our students as well, right? Like in the early stages, make sure the learners secure their mother tongue. After they do so, then bringing in additional languages supposedly won't hurt their mother tongue and actually could facilitate the development of those additional languages, right? So if we actually follow those time-tested theories, they work. Right. So it's going back to the idea of language policy and planning. If, for example, we do want to do quite a lot of things to teach our students, the next generation, a lot of languages, then that has to be planned ahead of time instead of just asking frontline teachers to do everything in every class period. That wouldn't work.
Any final words you'd like to share with my audience before we end today's conversation?
Yeah, I mean, language issues are so complex, right? So educators will have to continuously learn about it. And how can we do this? By following, one of the ways is to follow the channel, right? So we have these sustained conversations and talk to people about what they think. So I'm grateful that you open up the space for us to have this conversation.
And I'm grateful that you took the time out of your busy schedule to have the conversation with me. Thank you, Dr. Chang. That's it for today's episode. Thank you for attending my office hours. If you have any questions about Taiwanese education or bilingual education, send me an email at kmgraham@ntnu.edu.tw. I'll see you next time.